They were once the most sought-after faces, the idols of millions. Yet, behind the stage lights, they were notorious figures. Some slapped their colleagues in the face right on an award stage, some swindled millions of dollars from their own fans, and others were accused of beating their spouses and abandoning their children. So, who were the biggest jerks in the history of Golden Age Hollywood? Were they always rotten at heart, or did the blinding spotlight send them spiraling into bitterness and self-destruction? In today's video, we'll expose 20 names that once shocked the public, along with the infamous acts they'd probably never dare to mention again. 1. Steve McQueen, the king of cool, and his dirty backstage tactics. They called Steve McQueen the king of cool, a man with eyes as cold as steel, a defiant stance, and a charisma that made women swoon and men admire him. But that was only the polished facade on screen. Behind the scenes, McQueen was no noble legend, but a master of low-grade tricks willing to drag others through the mud just to stand taller himself. In 1974, the towering Inferno dominated the box office. But in the shadows, backstage, McQueen and Paul Newman were tearing at each other like predators, fighting over the last scrap of meat. Obsessed to a pathological degree with never being overshadowed, McQueen hired a personal assistant not to help with his acting, but to count every single line of dialogue for both men in the script. If he found himself with even one word fewer than Newman, he would explode at the writers, demanding they add meaningless lines just to even the tally. McQueen didn't care if the dialogue made sense. He just wanted the audience to see him more. But his dirtiest move came years earlier. In 1966, when James Garner landed the lead in Grand Prix, a role McQueen coveted so badly he lost sleep over it was a blow he couldn't swallow. One night, McQueen crept onto Garner's balcony and urinated directly on the bedroom door. No threats, no warning, just a filthy, humiliating act that left Garner scrubbing for days to erase the stench of contempt. It was McQueen's way of sending a message: I'm here and I'll crush you in the dirtiest way possible. Those who worked with McQueen said he had a chilling obsession he could not bear for anyone to outshine him even for a moment on screen. He would cut a co-star's screen time, rewrite scripts to make himself the center of attention, or leak damaging rumors to the press just to shake someone's career. One actor bitterly remarked, "He didn't just act in films, he controlled everything like a dictator behind the camera." So, while audiences remember a rugged, icy king of cool, those who faced him off camera remember a man with an ego swollen to sickness, hands always dirty, and a cold-bloodedness that could make your spine tighten. McQueen was living proof that Hollywood glory could be built from the filthiest shadows. And if McQueen was the rebellious cowboy of the screen, the next man was a real-life Hollywood cowboy, one who held the industry in the palm of his hand with secrets so dark no one dared speak them aloud. Number 2. Kirk Douglas, the Spartacus legend and a chilling disappearance. On the night of October 7, 1949, Los Angeles lay under a drowsy amber glow. Jean Spangler, a 26-year-old actress who had just signed a bit part contract with Columbia Pictures, left home in a simple dress, telling her family she was meeting a friend, and vanished forever. 2 days later in Griffith Park, her handbag was found. Among the makeup and personal papers was a crumpled note scrawled in haste. "Kirk, meet me at the hospital. It won't take long." Just hours after the Los Angeles Examiner ran the story on its front page, Hollywood was buzzing with hushed, chilling whispers in every tea room, bar, and studio hallway. Kirk Douglas. At the time, Douglas was in Palm Springs filming, shielded by a steel wall of Paramount's PR machinery. Police claimed he had an alibi, but then Douglas himself admitted to having met Spangler a few weeks earlier. Column queens Hedda Hopper and Luella Parsons didn't dare print his name, but hinted at a top male star linked to a mysterious disappearance enough to set the rumor mill ablaze without touching him. 6 years later, in 1955, Hollywood shook again. Lana Wood, sister of Natalie Wood, alleged that Douglas had assaulted Natalie, then only 16, at the Chateau Marmont. The meeting had been arranged by the studio under the pretext of discussing a collaboration, but turned into a nightmare. The Wood family never took the case to court, but Hollywood Confidential later revealed the studio paid over $25,000, more than $280,000 today, for a settlement in exchange for absolute silence. Douglas sailed through the 60s as if untouched, pocketing millions per film. But those who had been close enough to see knew he was not just Spartacus, he was a man who knew how to use money, power, and the press to bend reality. Accusations became rumors, names were buried in files, and stories drowned under the glitter Hollywood so carefully constructed. Chapter 3. Sean Connery, James Bond, and the misogynistic words that stunned the world. In 1987, on the Barbara Walters special, millions of Americans sat in front of their TVs, expecting an explanation, or at least a hint of remorse from the real-life James Bond. Instead, Sean Connery lifted his chin, looked straight into the camera, and coldly repeated the exact words he'd said over 2 decades earlier. "I haven't changed my opinion." Walters froze for a beat, and the whole country understood this wasn't some slip of the tongue from the past, it was a conviction he'd carried his entire career. That belief dated back to 1965, when Connery was at the height of his fame thanks to the Bond films. In a Playboy interview, he bluntly stated, "I don't think there's anything wrong with slapping a woman as long as you don't use a closed fist." The comment, printed verbatim and later re-quoted by the Los Angeles Times and The Guardian, ignited outrage from women's rights groups across the UK and US. But Connery didn't retract, didn't apologize, he simply stayed silent as if the world was overreacting. His cold, defiant streak showed on set too. In 1968, while filming Chalaco in Spain, Connery blew up at director Edward Dmytryk over reshooting a gunfight scene. The shouting match halted production for 48 hours, costing around $40,000. Variety called it a quiet mutiny from the lead actor, a clear hint that Connery didn't regard the director or crew with much respect. With female co-stars, Connery often displayed a controlling attitude. Actresses from Diamonds Are Forever recalled how he would make comments about women's looks in front of the entire crew, treating them like jokes, though for the women it was pure humiliation. Hollywood once tolerated Connery, but his arrogance was just one fragment of a dirtier power structure in that era. Because the next man didn't just rule with words or attitude, he turned every meeting, every party, and even his own bed into a weapon to climb to the top, no matter who had to pay the price. Chapter 4. Alfred Hitchcock, Genius Director or Pathological Obsessive. Alfred Hitchcock, hailed as the master of suspense for classics like Psycho and The Birds, didn't just stage horror on screen, he created real-life terror for the women who worked with him. To Hitchcock, they weren't actresses, they were personal property living props to feed his twisted pleasures and power plays. On the set of The Birds 1963, Hitchcock ordered live birds instead of mechanical ones, ignoring safety warnings. For an entire week, Tippi Hedren endured frenzied birds clawing and pecking at her face, leaving her eyelid gashed and sending her to the hospital. The New York Times published a photo of her with her eyes bandaged while Hitchcock stood by smirking faintly and saying, "This is a necessary sacrifice for the film." Other people's pain was nothing but material for his inflated ego. His obsession didn't end on set. When Hedren rejected his advances, he crushed her career. With a few phone calls, Hitchcock blocked contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, erasing her from major projects. In her memoir, she wrote, "My career was strangled to death simply because I wouldn't sleep with the director." Hollywood stayed silent. Everyone knew Hitchcock's power could bury anyone. Even in his early career, the cruelty was there. In 1935, filming The 39 Steps, he deliberately lost the key to the handcuffs binding lead actress Madeleine Carroll, leaving her chained for hours without food, water, or rest. From a distance, he stood with arms folded, grinning as her discomfort and humiliation played out like his personal entertainment. If Hitchcock used obsession to bind and break his victims' spirits, the next man on the list turned his own body into bait. Your 5. Errol Flynn, Robin Hood or Predator.